Now, I am aware, of course, of I've lived hedonistically. I've been a drug addict. I've lived indulgently for long periods of time. So I understand the nature of that power, and in practice how it may as well be a god, and how you conceptualize that could be pantheistically. You could see it as Aphrodite or as Venus. You could see yourself as being devoured by Cupid, and certainly by Eros, and making yourself the subject of such high humours.
Priapus, man. Priapus.
Priapus, indeed. indeed. But I saw some things in what you were saying that struck me as important. That when you were saying that, of course, when we default to making the self our deity, the sovereign being that which is currently charged, whichever instinct is at the wheel, whichever instinct is in the driving seat, that will become sovereign at that moment. If you have no recourse against that, if you have no principle, if you have no path, if you have no Tao, if you have no Christ, if you have no way of breathing and living God into being, then you will default to the instincts in conjunction with cultural influence. Those will be the two poles that will generate patterns as surely as if they were magnets on iron filings.
Hey friends, Russell Brand just told us about what it's like to give into all of your hedonistic tendencies and to make yourself God, and how that will lead to destruction. Let's listen to what Bishop Barron has to say about that topic based on the Sermon on the Mount.
I read Aquinas on the sermon, is the four things he identified as the blocks to the flow of grace: wealth, pleasure, power, honor. They're all taken on in the Beatitudes, So if wealth is your problem, how lucky you are. And the Greek there, makarios is the word, and we say blessed or happy, but they say you could even translate it as lucky. How lucky you are if you're poor, or poor in spirit is in Matthew's version. You might say how lucky you are if you're not addicted to wealth. So, wealth leads you down a path toward addiction. And when you follow that path, then you block the flow of grace. If pleasure is your problem, well, how lucky you are if you mourn. So it's not a masochistic thing. It's saying how happy you are if you're not addicted to good feelings. Because sometimes, as you say, following the summum bonum means you will not have good feelings at all. Just the contrary. So how lucky you are if you're not so addicted to that you block the flow of grace. Let's say power is your hang-up. Well, how blessed are the meek? How blessed are those without any particular power? Well, read it as how lucky you are if you're not addicted to power, because power is extraordinarily powerful addiction. So how lucky you are. And then honor. If honor is your hang-up, well, how lucky you are when people hate you and prescribe your name. Revile you. Well, in other words, how lucky you are if you're not addicted to honor. Because sometimes following the summum bonum means you're not going to be honored. Well, then once those four blocks those four blocks are out of the way, then the rest follow. How blessed are the pure of heart. That means my heart's not divided. I'm not following this and that, and what's my summum bonum? Well, today it's this. No, I'm pure. I'm single-hearted.
Integrated, single-minded, right?
Single-hearted. And that's the old Kierkegaard, the saint, someone who wants one thing, who desires one thing, right? So the single-hearted. How blessed are the peacemakers, because you'll become a maker of peace. The minute you get rid of these blocks and grace flows through you, you will become—
Instead of a servant of power.
Yeah, you'll become actually a peacemaker. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. That's the same thing. What do you hunger and thirst for? Well, wealth, pleasure, honor, or righteousness. I hunger for the one thing is to do the will of God, right? So the Beatitudes set up the basic dynamics, and then the rest of the sermon, I think, reveal kind of what that life begins to look like.
Bishop Barron just broke down the Sermon on the Mount for us, and he highlighted 4 specific things from St. Thomas Aquinas that block the flow of grace in our life. And all of those directly address the issues that Russell Brand highlighted at the beginning about making the self God and worshiping hedonistic tendencies. So the question that we should be asking is, what do we have to pursue? What do we have to aim towards in order to not give in to hedonistic tendencies and make ourselves God, but to become people who are a part of the kingdom of God according to the Sermon on the Mount that we are given by Jesus? Let's listen to this next clip.
Nor can I. And it's interesting that when I did the debate with Dawkins in the Oxford Natural History Museum, at the press conference afterwards, we were asked, was there anything that we agreed on? And there was one thing, and that is that truth exists. And this is a crucial thing. It depends that we are committed to the pursuit of truth. Otherwise, as you say, science is absolutely no point. I happen to believe that truth, of course, is not simply propositional truth, but ultimately truth is a person. And that is the very deep claim. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And it's interesting there that Jesus wasn't merely saying, I say true things. This goes much deeper. I am the truth. And if we set up a sequence of questions about anything, what is the truth about the atom? Well, you can split it into elementary particles. What is the truth about those? I believe this claim is so big that it's actually saying that at the end of the backward sequence of questions, Jesus Christ will say, I am the truth. And of course, that resonates with what you were studying in Exodus so interestingly. I am is the fundamental proposition about the nature of God.
John Lennox just spoke to us about truth and how truth is actually a person. And that's the claim that Jesus is making. I am the way, the truth, and the life. So what this really means for us is that when Jesus gives us the Sermon on the Mount, what he's ultimately saying is, this is the way that the world works. And when you live according to these things, you will be blessed and it will go well for you, right? The Sermon on the Mount, the things that Bishop Barron was breaking apart for us. When we pursue the person of truth, who is Jesus, that leads us into a life of fulfilling the Sermon on the Mount. And that leads us away from the hedonistic, self-absorbed, idolizing of the self that leads us to destruction that Russell Brand himself talked about as a person who has given himself over to that in the past and has since changed and given his life to Jesus. I hope that this video was helpful for you. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you all have a great rest of your day.